Everybody prays. That's the main point I want to make this morning, and I figure there's a pretty good chance it's going to upset some of you, so why bother putting it off? Get it out of the way early, and leave myself more chance to win you back. Everybody prays, they just call it things like centering, meditation, being present, or positive affirmations. I don't have any formal meditative or prayer practice, but I definitely pray. When I'm grappling with a particularly difficult computer problem, I've been known to say, "Come on, you expletive, just work." Now, this prayer is obviously less humble than the Lord's Prayer and less universally applicable than the Serenity Prayer, but it's still a form of prayer. After all, what is prayer but an acknowledgement of our own limitations and an earnest request for help from a power outside our understanding? When there are other people in the office, I try to remember to pray silently. Yoga is a spiritual practice, even though it's been commodified and stripped of its religious underpinnings. The practice itself is still a form of meditation. Even some so-called self-help programs like The Secret are just prayer repackaged for modern heathens. The law of attraction, the power of positive thinking, and other versions of putting something out into the universe are just prayers without articulating who or what you're praying to. The secret of the secret is that it's a prayer to privilege. The degree to which you can manifest your desires mostly depends on how much society is already set up to cater to them. How you pray will vary from person to person. After all, people are as unique as snowflakes, which is to say that there are 39 basic types with trivial variations determined by their environment during their formative period. Everybody prays because life requires faith. The universe is too complicated to ever fully be understood. And no matter how much we learn, there will always be things that are still outside our understanding. Whether it's people thousands of years ago cowering in a cave during a lightning storm, or today's generation grappling with a government and economic system which refuses to address climate change, there are forces that are beyond our control and comprehension. That is one of the constants in life, even if the specifics change. Faith is required not because it's a solution in itself, but as a ward against nihilism and despair. We cannot wish away the impending climate apocalypse, but we can pray for strength to keep working toward a solution, no matter how unlikely it may seem, for guidance when we don't know what to do, for the courage to remain open-hearted in a world continually trying to divide us. And we can have faith that the majority of people are compassionate and willing to do what's necessary, even if their leaders are not. Even science requires faith, that the instruments are telling you what you think they are, that the results weren't skewed by some factor you didn't account for, that the research you're building off of wasn't flawed. There's a famous psychological study from the 60s known as the marshmallow test. They put a marshmallow in front of a child, told the child they can have a second one if they don't eat the first one for 15 minutes, and then they left the room. If the child didn't eat the marshmallow, it was taken as an indicator of willpower, and then they tracked the kids throughout their lives and reached the conclusion that the willpower to delay gratification paid dividends later in life. It's one of the foundational pieces of social science research and has been scientific gospel for decades. It is also completely wrong. The original study was performed on just 90 children who all attended the same daycare on the campus where the study was performed. That campus just happened to be Stanford University, an elite and expensive college. A similar study was conducted last year, but 10 times as big and with a more representative cross-section of society. The new study found almost no correlation between so-called willpower and success later in life, once other factors had been accounted for. Instead, they found that both the ability to delay gratification and success later in life were related to the parent's socioeconomic background. The new conclusion was that children were more likely to trust that the promised second marshmallow would appear if their home life was economically stable and their parents had been able to follow through on similar promises in the past. And this stability translated into future success. This study was repeated as part of the Reproducibility Project, along with 100 other studies, and of those 100, many just as foundational as the marshmallow test, only 1/3 successfully replicated the original results. The majority did not. It's being called the Replicability Crisis, but it could also be described as a crisis of faith. Nothing tangible has been lost. The labs and universities weren't destroyed, the data still exists, and in some cases can be incorporated into future studies. What's missing is the trust, the faith, that previous findings and conclusions are reliable and can be added onto without reconfirming every assumption. As with any major change, it's causing turmoil in the scientific community. Some scientists would rather discredit the new findings than admit they built their careers and reputations on a mistake. Others are trying to ignore it in a vain hope that it'll all blow over, while still others are just deciding to retire early. Such upheaval is uncomfortable but necessary to maintain a healthy society. I hope and pray that we're headed for a similar upheaval in society as a whole to finally accept the reality of climate change. It will be uncomfortable, but the stakes are astronomically high, and denial and delay are not a solution. I know that a lot of Unitarians have a problem with the word prayer, even if the practices I've described are acceptable. But as my college communications professor always liked to say, the word is not the thing. 60% of verbal communication is not in the words, so it's best not getting bogged down on the denotative meaning of words. But I also know that I am broadening the definition slightly. So what do I mean when I say prayer? Simply put, I believe prayer is the act of directing your inner monologue while simultaneously opening yourself up to accept an answer in whatever form it takes. We all talk to ourselves constantly without thinking about it, and you can drive yourself a little mad if you try to think about what you're thinking about. Prayer is a way to tame the stream of consciousness by intentionally inserting your own directives into the flow. It can be as simple as repeating a mantra or positive affirmation, or as specific as beseeching a deity for help with some problem in your life. The trick is to divert the flow in the intended direction without attempting to fully control it, as that will just cause it to eddy and swirl in an even more chaotic fashion. Understand that I'm not trying to convince you to accept prayer in some scaled-down version of Pascal's wager. I'm telling you to accept that you already pray and that it's okay. Everybody prays, and if you don't, you should, because it works. Prayer works in two ways. The first and most direct way is if it spurs you to action. Faith without works is dead. James 2:26. You didn't really expect to get through a whole church service with prayer in the title without at least one biblical quote, did you? The important part of prayer is the work you do, not the prayer itself. So much of life is struggling to convince yourself to do the things you already know you should be doing. Most problems are difficult, not complicated. The solution to homelessness is to give homeless people homes. The solution to global warming is to stop burning fossil fuels. It is that simple, but it will be incredibly difficult. And if praying helps you do what's necessary, then you absolutely should. The Mormon Church's disaster relief trucks were the first to arrive in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, even before FEMA. Martin Luther King's faith helped him persevere for years, despite the knowledge that the struggle would almost certainly end in his death. That kind of faith and dedication isn't strictly rational, but sometimes that's what's required. The second way prayer works is by improving your luck. And this isn't some superstitious or metaphysical claim, it's a fact. If you do it right, praying will make you luckier, because luck is a skill. British psychologist Richard Wiseman conducted a series of studies on people who described themselves as either very lucky or very unlucky, to see if there were any commonalities. What he found were 4 traits. Lucky people are more likely to notice and act upon chance opportunities, make lucky decisions by listening to their intuition, create self-fulfilling prophecies by expecting good things to happen, and have a resilient attitude that transforms bad luck into good. In one experiment, he gave his subjects a newspaper and asked them to count the number of pictures in the paper. Unlucky people tended to take about 2 minutes to finish. Lucky people were done in mere seconds. How? Well, on the second page, there was a message that said, "Stop counting, there are 43 photographs in this newspaper," in 2-inch type. Lucky people saw it, while unlucky people were too focused on their task to notice. In another experiment, he left a 5-pound note on the ground where his subjects were going to walk past. The lucky people found it, the unlucky people stepped right over it. This isn't merely a matter of measuring awareness and calling it luck, because after he identified the 4 aspects of luck, he was able to teach the unlucky people simple exercises to make themselves luckier. Awareness is negatively impacted by anxiety. The more focused you are on one thing, the more worried you are about missing that thing, the less likely you are to notice things that you weren't expecting. In extreme cases, you can physically get tunnel vision. So how does this relate to prayer? Well, all 4 aspects of luck can be improved through prayer. By calming your mind and opening yourself up to the unexpected, by listening to your intuition, and by adopting a resilient attitude in the face of adversity, and creating self-fulfilling prophecies by expecting good things to happen. Well, that just sounds like a long-winded way of saying, have faith. Even before I'd heard about Professor Wiseman's luck research, I was already practicing a lot of what he teaches because it turns out comedy writing is very much related to luck. Comedy is all about noticing the things other people don't notice, the commonalities between seemingly disparate things and the myriad parts of life that make no logical sense if you really think about it, but most of the time we don't because we're just too focused on getting through it. Like putting a no stopping sign right next to a stop sign, or the fact that an acquired taste is just Stockholm Syndrome with food. Most of the time, jokes just pop into my head out of nowhere with no real indication of how it got there. like a $5 bill lying on the sidewalk, and all I have to do is grab them and hold on to them. But when I'm working to a deadline, then I have to force it, which is somewhat contradictory because you can't go looking for the unexpected. The best you can do is try to maintain a posture of openness. Transitioning from my day job solving computer problems to this state requires a mental shift, and how I go about that should sound familiar by this point. I put on music to drown out external distractions, then I focus on the problem for a few minutes, and then I just try to let my mind wander. Mostly this means alternately staring at the unfinished sentences on my screen and staring at nothing, but I also go for walks and note down anything that occurs to me that seems relevant. Sometimes I ask myself, what am I really trying to say? Which is a way of trying to force myself to listen to my intuition. Most of the time, I have a sense of what's missing or where I'm trying to go. It's just a matter of filling in the blanks. There are really only 5 ideas in this homily. The rest is scaffolding and decoration. But the scaffolding is necessary to support the ideas. I mean, if I just come up here and said, everybody prays, faith is necessary, luck is a skill, and then sat down again, nobody would have gone away happy. So I had to fill in the blanks, and it took a lot of mental trickery to entice inspiration to strike enough times to connect it all together in a way that's more or less coherent in what I wanted to say. Is this prayer? I think so. I'm asking the universe for something, and usually I get an answer. Whether that answer pops into my brain out of the ether or arrives while I'm doing something else hours later is immaterial as the thoughts themselves. And I suppose what you ascribe as the source of these gifts goes a long way toward defining your personal theology. Humanists and atheists would tend to credit internal inspiration, theists and mystics something external. I would describe myself as a weak atheist, and I'm not using that as an ontological categorization. I mean it in the slang sense. My atheism is weak. I am a bad atheist. I am bad at being an atheist. Logically, I find it highly unlikely that there is some sentient entity watching us and manipulating our lives in ways we can't detect, and even less likely that people thousands of years ago who hadn't even discovered bacteria or subatomic particles somehow unraveled one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. If I were a purely rational being, that would be the end of it. But more than anything, I'm a narcissist, and at my core, I believe that there has to be a power greater than myself that loves me so that it can love me more than it loves other people. My faith is an extension of my ego. I live my life expecting that things will work out for me, and generally speaking, they do, because of privilege, because of luck, or because the universe is sentient and encourages my laissez-faire attitude, who can say? But there are forces beyond my control and problems I cannot overcome. My mother has cancer. It's not curable, so although it's responded well to treatment so far, it's a near certainty that she will die from it unless she dies from something else first. Which is actually true for all of us. Studies have shown that everyone will get cancer if they live long enough. The only way to avoid it is to die of something else first. That is our destiny. But it's more immediate when it's your own mother and she's being diagnosed and had surgery and radiation and immunotherapy, and her death has been imminent to varying degrees for several years. She's always said that she doesn't want to linger while her mind goes, and as the saying goes, be careful what you wished for because you may get it. We don't tend to talk about death much in our society, despite being one of the only certainties, and we seem to be taking a similar approach to the climate apocalypse despite its increasing inevitability. In the coming years, we will all have to make sacrifices to do what we can to save our fellow beings and the planet itself. It will be a test of our faith, of our dedication to the 7 principles and our personal beliefs, but it is necessary. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And if we need to pray for the strength and courage to do what's necessary, for faith that it will be enough even when it seems nothing can be, then we must do that as well. Amen. Blessed be, and may it ever be so.